Internet, thank you once again for joining me to talk all things vertical dramas. Um, I know you like it when I find really interesting people to talk to, and I think I found possibly the most interesting person to talk to, which is Aaron Feder, because he does many things. He's been in gazillion verticals. He's acted in verticals, but he is also a stunt coordinator and he's also an intimacy coordinator. So pretty much he is absolutely vital on set and does everything. So I'm going to ask him to give a little introduction of himself to you now.
Good morning. My name's Aaron Feder, and as mentioned, yeah, I'm a full-time actor. I've been doing stunts since I was pretty young. I think my first stunt training course, I was about 12 years old, when I did a weekend course with my acting teacher named Peter Burkrat. And intimacy has been a little more new. I have a background in theater because we've always had intimacy coordinators in theater for a very long time, but for different reasons. And then when I started getting into verticals, I started picking it back up again and beginning to adapt my process a little bit more for the vertical process. Shooting verticals is definitely different than, say, working on a music video or a student film or a big budget, studio project. So I've been able to adapt my process project by project over the past 81, 82 projects that I just wrapped last night,
Wow.
um, to really adapt the process that I have for verticals.
So, can I just go back to what do you get taught as a 12-year-old on stunt training? Because that sounds awesome.
So back then, kids were allowed to do a little bit more stunts, like falls, bumping into tables, and basic stage combat. And that's what I was learning at 12 years old was basic stage combat. It's like how to stack a hit. A lot of times when you see in verticals, you can't actually see the impact of the hit, which is what we call stacking. And we might see the fist come across the camera, but we don't see the actual impact. And that was one of the first things that I learned how to do as a kid, and definitely a skill set that you will see used in verticals constantly for almost every slap.
And is that give something gives you? I imagine that would give you quite a lot of cred as a 12-year-old. You can do a bit of
I guess
stage
a little bit
combat.
too. Yeah, a little bit here and there. But I mean, I was also learning martial arts as a kid and all kinds of things like that. But I always make a huge distinction from practical fighting techniques and stage combat. Stage combat is very much more of a dance. And that's why when I get actors who I have to do stunts for, I'm much more excited when they have a dance background rather than a fighting background.
And is that probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people have?
I'd say when it comes to stunts, that is the biggest misconception. Because a lot of times I'll get day players who are very excited and they're like, oh, I'm a kickboxer. Oh, I do this kind of stage, this kind of combat. And I'm like, great, I need you to forget all that. Because what I really want more than anything is people with the ability to dance with a partner, to read and respond with their partner. The general rule we have for stunts, the victim is always responsible for selling the stunt. So the aggressor has to be able to like look aggressive, but not actually apply any force to the victim. It's always the person being choked who has to sell the stunt. A very simple thing in a choke is the choke is the hand on the throat, but it's only activated for a stunt when the other person grabs the wrist. And that allows them to control the hand. And then pretty much the victim is entirely in control of the stunt.
That's a really good little tidbit. So, if you're doing loads of stuff as a kid, what's your path into then being on screen? Was that pretty instant, or did you have a winding path?
It was pretty instant. I mean, it was something that I wanted from a very young age. I've always been a massive film nerd. I grew up in front of the television, and it was always my dream to be part of the stories, that shaped me as a kid. And I dragged my mom, tooth and nail, and I started modeling as a kid because that's usually what you can get into in the East Coast. And then little bit by little bit, I started to audition for acting roles. I used to travel out here to LA for something called IMTA, which is like a big international market for young models and talent. Elijah Wood was discovered there. We get to do all kinds of model-on competitions and runway competitions. It's a very good thing.
So, what was kind of your first paid one? Like, as I guess as an adult, what was your first paid acting job? Would you say?
As a child or an adult?
Probably both, as a child and then as an adult.
I think the biggest thing that I did as a kid, and I don't talk too much about my child's career. It's a different IMDb, it's a different pseudonym,
Yeah.
but one project that is listed is a movie called The Civil Action, and this was a courtroom drama with John Travolta and Robert Duvall that I worked on when I was 16 years old. My role, you'd have to look and you'd have to have really, really fine eyes to be able to pick it out, and recognize me.
Okay, right. Well,
Yeah.
that's a challenge for everyone. Then you need to go and watch that and see if you can spot. Um, so as an adult, where did you, because it ended up, grew up on the East Coast, did you
Correct.
move around then to, because a lot of people say, oh, well, then you have to go to LA to, if you really want to do film and TV. What was your process once you sort of turned 18?
I actually left the industry at like 17, 18, and I worked in the default world, as we call it. And I worked in hospitality. I was a chef for a number of time, a number of years, and I was working overseas as kind of like an international bartender. I was in China, Taiwan, Bangkok for a number of years, working as like an international bartender for hotels and craft cocktail bars. I always meant to come back to acting. I left it for very specific reasons. I didn't want to grow up in the industry. I wanted to come back when I wanted different things to it. And I said I'd come back in my 30s. But my travel abroad was so generous and quite a great gift that I kept saying, one more year, one more year. And all of a sudden, I'm about 40 years old. I'm working in a hotel in Bangkok. It's called the Kimpton Malai as their beverage director. And we have productions that begin to come to the hotel. And one of them is a Marvel production. And I begin to become friends with some of the actors and the crew. And I remember one specific moment where they were coming off set and they're in the pool and I'm setting up champagne for them. And I remember the camaraderie. I remember the joy when you wrap in a day and the collaborative kind of joy that comes from that. And that was the trigger that set me back, where I'm like, okay, it's time to go back to Hollywood. It's time to go back and do what I love. I enjoyed what I was doing a lot in beverage,
Mm.
but I missed being a part of storytelling. I
Didn't you
missed the
have,
collaboration.
haven't you got a world record? I'm sure you told me you had a world record.
The hotel that I worked at in Bangkok has the world record for the world's largest Negroni. It is correct, and that was my project. I was not there to see it through because I had already left and headed to LA, but it was the
Yeah.
project that I started and pushed the ball down the hill with Guinness.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. So what was the year roughly when you came to LA?
This would be about 4 years ago. This is just as the pandemic was kind of beginning to slow down,
Mm.
and we were beginning to work again in movies. We were invited back on set with multiple COVID tests. I think that year most of us got anywhere from 200 to 300 COVID tests.
Were you doing them daily? Was because that was yeah, that was what was happening in the UK. You had to pretty
Yeah.
much daily prove you could go in and
Every single set, you would do a COVID test beforehand, where you'd go to some off-site, and then on
Mm.
the day, you'd be doing your COVID test before you could work.
Did you have the temperature guns as well? Because we all had the you
We
got
had
the
the
zap.
temperature guns. We really had the techs that like to scratch your brain. That's what
Ah,
we have the most. And it was like,
yeah,
I don't really think you need to go into my deep thoughts, but they
yeah.
tried.
Because it was like temperature gun. If you fail that, then you have to do the up your nose thing, and then you're
Yeah.
left. And then we're all sat there, weren't we, like little chemists in these sets trying to. I just remember trying to like make the test tube things stand up, and it would fall over, and it would yeah. And
It was
particularly,
great
I
work
can
for some
find trying to
people,
do
I'll say
those
that.
tests on a kid. That is not easy.
Yeah. Working with kids is always a huge, and I was a kid on set, so I'm pretty sensitive around it. But I could only imagine with the COVID compliance officers having to do the tests with them.
um. So once you go back on set, what did you start as? Were you acting initially? And sort of when did
I
the
was
stunts
acting
come in?
initially. I was acting
Yeah.
and doing stunt roles.
Mm.
Because I came back and I wasn't too focused on crew, and I really wanted to stretch my wings as an actor. I was doing a lot of student films. I'd say for about 2 years, I was donating at least 30% of my time to student films, which is a really great reason to be in LA. We have four of the top five film schools in the world here in Los Angeles. So it's kind of the most fantastic place to be an actor, get lots of experience. It's becoming less and less that as the studio system collapses, but it's the vertical system that's really filling that gap and giving even more opportunities than the studio system ever gave anyone.
Now that's really interesting that you talk so positively about that. So when do verticals then come into your lexicon? When's the first time that that sort of show pops up for you?
So it actually goes back to the student films. I did so many with so many, young kids, young filmmakers. When verticals popped up, it was always people just out of college who were the crew and the producers and the line producers. And I got phone calls from somebody and they're like, "Hey, we need a day player. It's a cop role." And I'm like, "I'm not doing anything. Everything's on strike right now. So sure, I'll go over." And it was called Crazy Beach. Become the Idol, I believe, and this is over 2 years ago.
Wow.
And every scene where you see me as a cop, I have some type of donut or Danish in my hand. And that's what I loved about Verticals is I was able to have ideas and fight for them, and the director would be like, "Oh, okay, sure, go ahead, do it." Where
So
in
that
a
was
studio,
you. You were like, I'm doing this, but I'm bringing my food.
yep. And every scene, even the arrest scene, I have some type of food product in my hand. I love the small comedy bits that we can get in Verticals, the subtle little, just ridiculous, hilarious things that we're able to do.
So on one of those early sets, what sort of time length was it? What sort of how long was it? Was it a week? Was it longer? How's it
We were
changed since
shooting about
then?
7 days to 8 days originally.
Mm, seven total
Um,
days. Okay.
yeah, I'd say like 9 is pretty common.
Mm.
6 is the theoretical limit. I just
Yeah.
came off one that tried to do 5 days, that tried to do an entire vertical in 5 days. And of course, in the end, we ended up adding a day.
Yeah. Okay, so that's quite useful. 5 is a bit ambitious. 6 is really what you need. Um,
6 is the theoretical limit. I feel
mhm.
like 8 and 9 is good. 6, we're on fire, we're running, we're making cuts, we're pulling our hair out, and we get there by the end by the skin of our teeth.
So you started off as a cop. Were you doing stunts in that one as well, or was it
Minor
just acting
stunts.
initially? Minor stunts.
I mean, you have two different types of schools of stunts. We have
Mm.
stunts with stunt players, which
Yeah.
we never have on verticals for the most part, and we have
Mm.
first team choreography, where we're putting action into the frame, but
Mhm.
there's never any real risk to the actors. We're always
Yeah.
cheating it in a way where even if an accident happened, they're protected.
Yeah.
When we do traditional stunts, real stunts, there's always a pretty large risk.
Mm.
That's why we rehearse. We try to take that risk and reduce the window of risk to a really tiny, manageable kind of thing. But for verticals, I like to say that all the stunts we do are as safe as walking up or down a flight of stairs.
Okay. And is there then as well? I mean, obviously people know that just that frame shrunk. How does that impact what you're coordinating for how it comes across?
So much. The vertical frame versus the horizontal frame, very, very different. I mean, right off the bat, you're never going to see people walking and talking in a vertical.
That's so true. Yes.
Very, very
They're always
rare
standing, aren't they? They're always standing. Yeah.
because it's very hard to track and
Mm.
focus on somebody talking in a vertical frame. A lot of things are kind of complicated, and this is what I think is kind of the most interesting about verticals. Is I believe in the future some DP, some cinematographer is going to figure out a way to use the frame for something we can't do horizontally, for something that looks better vertically that we could never achieve horizontally. That code will be cracked pretty soon. I keep looking at old camera techniques from the 70s,
Hmm.
things like split diopter, where we were able to split the screen in half and focus on something in the background and the foreground at the same time. And I want to use these old camera tricks and see how they look vertically, because I think some of them might offer a new perspective to the vertical frame, which will help us crack the code a little bit.
So how does it affect it with stunts then? Kind of how does it limit what you can do? And sort of what are your priorities then when you're trying to like, I guess also what do you know this will look good on a vertical and I can make this work?
For the stationary stunts, it actually helps a lot. Like for a horizontal frame, if I throw somebody, I typically need to see them thrown entirely. Where
Mm.
for a vertical frame, I just need to see you thrown out of frame.
Mm.
And then I can use another shot to see you hit the ground. And I can slow down both of the motions by catching you out of frame on one. And then really when you hit the ground, I'll put you in your final position, like on the ground in that landing. We'll rewind about 1 second. And on action, you just need to land into it. So typically for the vertical frame, it makes a lot of the stunts that we do easier.
Okay, that's really useful to know. Now you've obviously, as we know, there's a lot of genres in verticals. Well, a lot, I say. So obviously you've got like werewolf ones and the mafia ones, the billionaire ones. Are there ones that you know when you look at the script, you're like, that is going to be more intense? I just know from the genre they're the ones where I always end up we're doing more. Or is it fairly spread?
I mean, it's fairly spread. You never really know. The ones for an intimacy coordinator where I know my work's cut out for me are the
Mm.
ones where there's a large age gap between the romantic leads,
Yeah.
which usually lends to like a BDSM one, which a lot of
Yeah.
times I tend to pass those off to other intimacy coordinators who are more skilled at that kind of, heavy,
Yeah.
heavy intimacy.
Mm. So this is the next thing. So obviously stunts, but then interview coordination. How does that work? How does that cross over, basically? And are the qualifications you need to take for both, or is it more you build up on the reputation? Just out of interest, just professionally, how does that work?
I mean, everything is reputation in the end, but of course, there's certification and qualifications in different schools to where you can learn all these things. A lot of what I've learned beyond outside of the classroom has been shadowing other people. Stunts is very much an apprenticeship trade, and we follow other stunt coordinators and we get apprenticeship days, and that's kind of how we build that up a little bit. But for stunts, we all have our specialization. We don't do everything. If you want to put somebody on wires, I have a guy to call. If you want to light somebody on fire, I have a different guy to call. My specialization tends to be working with actors versus stunt players, and a lot of stage combat and a lot of swords, which I don't get to use too much in verticals. For intimacy coordination, it does not cross over in studio projects, but it crosses over perfectly for verticals, which is why we have maybe 4 or 5 of us that are combination, that are qualified to do both stunts and intimacy. Because a lot of the scenes are intimate stunts where we have intimacy going on, but there's also fast action and there's dangerous action going on, sometimes usually very aggressive. And that's where having one person who can do both blocking comes in play. Now, what makes us really good, I think, with having a stunt background in verticals is we know how to cheat things. We know how to use the camera to tell lies, where traditional intimacy coordinators aren't really skilled at that. They don't understand too much of how the cake is made. They have more of a therapy background and they're more focused on purely boundaries, emotional, not so much on how we can tell lies in the camera to keep the talent even more comfortable. So a lot of times in these intimate situations, I'll pull the actor out of the frame and I'm telling a lie that only one actor is in frame. Other examples are we might see the shot where the girl's riding her hands up the guy's jeans and then maybe unzipping a little bit. If it's one of mine, there's no guy in the jeans. I have 2 C-stands, towels, and a pillow inside, simulating that there's a human body inside there. And that way the actor's even more comfortable, kind of very closely interacting. And that's what we do when there's stunt and IC combo, is we're figuring out how we can tell the same story, but keep the actor even more comfortable. The
That's really
takes that we
clever.
work on and the things that we ask, especially the female lead to do, because the female lead, heavy emotional dialogue. They're in every scene, back to back to back. They really get the brunt of the punishment. So anything that we can really do to alleviate some of the pressure, the awkwardness, and help things move a little bit faster for them is always appreciated.
What about the classic kidnap scene? Because I
Yeah, I mean, those
presume
are a stunt.
you've coordinated a lot of those. Um, I've been told that obviously the ropes aren't actually tied, and it's kind of all that. It's sort of. Could you almost talk through how you put together one of those?
Yeah, the tied to a chair one is the easiest one for the most part because really you just need to wrap the ropes in a certain way where it looks tied, and then the ends of the rope are always held by the actor. So at
Yeah,
any point they could let go and be
yeah,
free.
mm,
But I'm trying to develop a new way of doing it where I want to make Velcro wristbands that
yeah.
look like burlap rope. And they can be
Oh
Velcroed
wow.
together so that it's
Yeah,
really easy for the actor to come out of them. And the reason we mainly do that is because it's really, really uncomfortable and it's a difficult stress position to have somebody tied like this, physically
yeah,
really tied, for what can be up to an hour, hour and a
yeah.
half, maybe longer if we're doing that scene. We need the ability to like take her out of it, put back in, out, in really quickly, get some water in between the takes, all those little things. We need that flexibility.
And are there other sort of common vertical trope scenes like that where you would say people underestimate, as you said, the stress that someone's under and sort of that you're trying to alleviate?
Yeah, I mean, all the intimate scenes are definitely very stressful. Like my red flags go up when I meet an actor and they're excited about either an intimate scene or an eating scene. Those show inexperience and immaturity in my mind,
Mm,
because they're some of the most difficult things as an actor to do. An eating scene is always very complicated. Best case scenario is food poisoning. Worst case scenario is you have to match it for every take. And
yeah,
intimate scenes are very awkward. even for the
Mm.
most professional actors. So all I'm really trying to do as a coordinator is remove as much of the awkwardness as I can, create a
Mm.
foundation of consent where the actors know what they can do, they know what their boundaries are, and create a foundation where they can communicate with each other and perform as talent. Because me as an actor, I've been in these situations. I've been fully exposed to camera in many different types of situations and without an intimacy coordinator. So I always look at it as how would I want to be protected in that
Yeah.
scenario?
That's really interesting what you said about eating because I know a little bit about this because I've spoken to people in DMs and they've told me about their regrets of how they've eaten cake or whatever, and then realizing. Could you explain a bit to people about the fact that when we see someone eat something, it doesn't happen just one time?
Oh, matching. I mean, so when we shoot something, we have multiple angles. We usually do an establishing shot, which is a wide, which covers a little bit of everything. And then we begin to get single coverage of the actors, which can be like a cross shoot. And then we have inserts. So you basically have, at bare minimum, three big setups where you have to match something. And then we're doing at least three, which is on the low end, three takes of every setup. And every time you take a bite of that burger, they need to replace that burger.
Mm.
So, because you need to not have that bite for the next take, you're doing it over and over and over again. And then inversely, when we keep going, it needs to match the bites that you took earlier. So typically, we have a bucket next to the actor and they're spitting it out. And this is for many reasons because you don't need to eat 13 burgers at 9 in the morning.
Yeah.
And because most of the time, these burgers, they're edible, but only technically. You know, they were probably purchased a few hours ago, most likely at Denny's. There's no dressing on them whatsoever. And a lot
Yeah.
of times, if art is really skilled, they have the ability to remove like the meat or at least a lot of the guts of some
Yeah.
food, so it's more hollow and it's easier for the actor to kind of eat and chew again and again and again and again. That's why you'll always see the most seasoned actors when they're around food will just pick. They have a burger with French fries, and you'll see him just with one French fry. You see the other guy with the
Clever.
cheeseburger, and you're like, oh, you're in trouble.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Um, are there any other things like that that, as viewers, we wouldn't know that you're looking at a script going, oh, you think an eating scene is simple, but actually that brings in a whole lot of behind the scenes magic to make it work?
I mean, there's so much. I mean, what I think about with verticals a lot is our poor audio tech.
Mm.
'Cause we tend to have scenes with 8 people, 10 people in them all talking in a very small frame. It's so complicated for an audio tech to lav all of them up. And the way we have banter in some of these verticals, you're not the MF CEO. How could you be the MF CEO? Uh, the audio tech works really, really hard, and it's one person doing the boom operating and doing the mixing, and they're definitely an unsung hero if the sound is good, because good sound is very, very difficult, and it's something that I think we don't put a lot of attention to in the verticals. So when it's
Mm.
good, somebody worked really, really hard to do it.
Okay, that's really interesting. So that's actually a real challenge. Um, when with your work, are you involved at all once the project's finished shooting, or is it kind of it's out of
Occasionally.
your hands and then you go on to the next one?
So occasionally an editor might ping me, but what I've learned for stunts is we really have to shoot like an editor. We're not doing the
Mm.
same coverage we are for dialogue. I have to think exactly the moment the viewer is going to see, chain to the next one, chain to the next one. So usually I've given them everything they need, but occasionally they'll call me and they'll be like, "Hey, this scene here, these are the shots I have. How did you envision that cutting?" And I'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be from this shot to this shot to this shot to this shot with this insert." But yeah, for stunts, for action, we definitely have to think what the viewer's going to see as the fist is coming, what the viewer's
Mm.
going to see on the impact, what they're going to see directly after that. Where for dialogue, we have a lot more options. You know, we kind of cast a wide net, and then we can look at, oh, for this bit of dialogue, I prefer the reaction she's giving. Oh, for this
Yeah.
bit of dialogue, I prefer to see him deliver it, and we kind of give them as many options as possible. For stunts and for intimacy, we tie their hands. You know, the editor is really forced to use what I give them because it was very carefully constructed.
I like that. So you've made that decision as clear as you can for them of like just follow this.
As much as I can, I actually force the editor's hand. So this is a great example for slaps. I typically have the actors snap their fingers in all the
Mm.
wide coverage So they'll swing their hand and snap their fingers, which makes it unusable to the editor. So if you ever see that in a cut where it looks like a slap, but there's kind of a snap, then the
Yeah.
editor made a mistake. That way, when I do the actual take where I want them to sell it, I line up the slap, I add the audio, and the editor has no choice but using that take.
Very clever. Um, so of your 81, was it 82?
I just wrapped 82 last night.
What are a few of your favorite projects, and in particular, maybe stunts that you've put together and you're like, that came across really well on screen, that I'm like, I'm really proud of that one.
Titles are really hard to remember, especially because they bleed into each other so much. But there was one I did for Stunts with an actor named Jeff Violette, and I believe Anna DeRusso as well. And I fill in the stunt roles, and this is one where you
Yes.
can see me doing a traditional stunt where we're jumping in a pool.
Billionaire Alpha Won't Let Me Go, and it is one
I
of my
believe
favorite
so. I
verticals.
believe so.
Yes.
And this is
Yeah.
one where there's a kidnap scene with a minor too, with
Mm.
Aramis,
Yeah.
who amazing young actor. And I believe I'm dragging him off of a fence for the kidnapping
Yeah.
because they wanted me carrying him, and there was a whole flight of stairs, and I'm like, no, we can't do that. Like
Mm.
anytime there's any possibility of injury, especially with a child, it's a hard no.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we put him to the fence. Aramis, you hold onto the fence. I pretend like I'm dragging you off. I thought it sold really, really well. But then there's other stunts in that one too, where Jeff drops down into a pool with like a superhero landing, and then there's a big fight sequence, and that sequence I got to shoot entirely on my own. There's no dialogue, so I'm in control of every shot in the
Mm.
camera. And there's a scene where Jeff throws me into a wall, and I've got my back brace in, and we've got stunt dust all over the place, and that was pretty fun for a vertical, for sure. But I guess I don't really have favorite titles. I really just have all my favorite, talent that I get to work with. And 99% of them are just absolute sweethearts.
Mm.
From Jeff Violette, Eric, Cayman Cardiff. These guys they're all phenomenal. The female leads are so hardworking. They really get put through the ringer more than the male leads because they are
Mm.
in every single scene, so they never get a break on set. Their dialogue is so much heavier, and emotionally, they're constantly being asked to go to very difficult places.
Mm.
So, yeah, every female lead I've worked with, I'm in awe of. They're so talented and hardworking and unwavering.
Because I think that's one of the key things, isn't it, of sort of realizing as I've talked to everyone is that yeah, you're delivering really high emotion the entire time, all the way through, aren't you? Because of the nature of it, that's how verticals are. There's
Yeah.
not a kind of, oh, there's a day where we're just kind of low key and it's a bit of exposition. It's like everything is like drama, 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 drama. Um, what are the kind of techniques? Is that partly why I guess that everyone tells me that the sets are, you will become a family because you have to get each other through and keep spirits up in order to be able to deliver that on screen?
Yeah. I mean, that's the best part of it. That's why I'm in this business is the camaraderie. I
Mm.
can honestly say in the past 4 years, I've been to one premiere out of 100, 200 projects because I'd rather go to work and be on set than going to a premiere. If I was free, I would go, but I'd rather go and do the project that I'm working on right now. But yeah, it is a very heavy emotional content, and keep in mind that we're doing between 12 to upwards of 20 pages a day, where
Mm.
a traditional studio set, I was on season 3 of Monster this that'll come out this year, and you'll see a stunt that I do. That was one stunt for the whole day, and it was probably like 10 seconds of screen time
Mhm.
the entire day, one scene, one
Wow.
page. Verticals, I've seen upwards of 23 pages in one day. Yeah.
So, what would you say? Because there's a lot of people now, I mean, particularly in the UK, for instance, they've finally woken up and realised that verticals are a thing and obviously creating lots of jobs. Um, what are the key things you would tell people who are looking at coming into the space? What do they need to know? What are the biggest mistakes or misconceptions they could have?
I think for an actor, it's a phenomenal place to be. It's a phenomenal ground where the stakes are a little bit lower, so you can feel more comfortable to get camera ready.
Mm.
Um, Nobody is camera ready instantly. Everybody is nervous in front of the camera for many, many repetitions until eventually you just become comfortable in front of it. And that only happens with repetition, repetition, repetition.
Mm.
And you see a lot of actors getting more opportunities to get in front of the camera. and get that process than ever existed before. And these are hard-working actors who have been grinding with no leg up, no nepotism, no friends in the industry to give them a leg up. They landed in LA, they got some headshots, they got on Actors Access, and they started grinding. And now they have opportunities to do dialogue multiple days a week. And I see them all the time, from the day players to the background to the leads. These are all consummate hardworking actors that I see on different sets. I meet on studio sets, and then I see them on these. I saw an AD last week that I worked with on Winning Time. Winning Time was a big HBO show, literally millions of dollars per episode. And I show up one day and I see him as the first AD, which is the most crucial role on set. First AD is like the most important human. And I was so surprised and so happy to see him on Verticals. And I'm like, dude, you want to keep working? I'll get you booked on as many as possible. So it's really good to see more people taking the step into it. And I think what they're going to realize that it has the energy of a student film with more funding. Everybody is still happy. They're still in the industry for the right reason, where sometimes on big studio projects, big union projects, you have 150 people doing the job of 10 students. A lot of thumb twiddling and a lot of just, inflated budgets. And people aren't really happy to be there too. They're more worried about their boat payments and they don't really care about movies anymore. At least on
Yeah.
these sets, everybody has energy. These sets, a grip can have an idea about an acting note and not get fired. Where realistically, on a studio set, if you step out of your lane, you could be in trouble. So nobody has an idea. Nobody's going to be like, hey, that apple box is in frame. Because it's not my job to say that. And if it's not my job, I'm not going to open my mouth so I can protect my next job. To me,
Yeah.
that's the death of art. And in verticals, we still have an energy on set where it's like, okay, that's a bad idea, but thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
That I like.
I like that. So, and then as you said, that brings you back to what you were saying of why you wanted to be there. That's much more collaborative. So that's
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
working together in the energy. So having been in verticals since black and white vertical days in my head of 2 years ago, what are the biggest changes you've seen and where do you think they're going?
I mean, the changes we've seen is we try to make things that are outside the typical vertical tropes, with better lighting, more care, more detail in the scripts, plot lines that tie together, and they're not successful. So
Mm,
we're starting to understand that we can make small baby steps outside of that kind of format. We still need the chaos. We still need day players that we never tie up their storylines. All these confusing things are what makes them successful in some ways.
mm,
So I'm hoping that in the near future, we begin to get outside of those ridiculous tropes. But I know that it's going to take little baby steps to get there for the most part. There have been some great ones that have come out recently that I've really loved, but they were not successful, even though they're really, really good projects. So I'd like to think maybe they become successful later on where people rediscover them.
do you want to name those? Because we can get people to go and watch them. So what are the ones that you...
One of my real favorite ones that came out recently was Can Crush, that I
Mm,
thought was really, really good. And this is with Puppy Love Productions. And I think this one still did actually quite well. But
yeah.
this one was really outside the mold.
Oh, the one, yes, it's on Vigalo. It's
Big Blue,
basically they meet
correct.
at a fan convention, and that's kind
I
of
was so upset that I
is
didn't
there.
work on it. I knew everybody working on it and all the producers, and I kept sending them messages, and I'm like, why am I not on this?
Okay, so yeah, so that one was. Is there any other ones as well that you're like that needs more eyes
Um,
on it?
they did one recently that was very Game of Thrones. This was
Mm,
shot in Boston, and it had all the art, all the wardrobe, and it was very, very medieval. I forget
mm,
the name of this one. I believe it was a real short, if I'm not
mm,
mistaken, but the budget was huge. And
mm,
I think they learned a little bit of a lesson. Maybe they were trying to demonstrate what they could do with certain
mm.
budgets, but it was definitely one that did not make what it needed to.
That's interesting because I think everyone knows that we need it will burn out if it just stays on the exactly the same tropes and stories. But at the same time, you've got yeah, I think there's a bit of education of the audience of taking us to something new and making sure you still deliver what everyone's there for, which is escapism, pace, and a dopamine hit. So
Yeah. I think it's all based on the market. I mean, our market has been very specific for a long time, but it's starting to change. Now, my niece and younger people I know between the ages of like 13 and 22 are beginning to pick up these a lot more, which worries me sometimes because some of the content that we make is definitely not
Hmm.
something that I want young men and young women learning or taking examples from.
Hmm.
I feel like some of the content we do needs to be looked with an adult eye.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. Yep.
so I was on a Disney show not too long ago, and I remember listening to the dialogue and thinking, this is just a vertical, but it's clean. So I think one
Mhm.
of the next big jumps that we're going to see, and we're going to see this with the big streaming platforms, is we're going to have those kid shows, those iCarlys, those types of shows designed, cut, and formatted for your phone. The vertical format's not going away. We're going to see the big studios stepping in, and we know that they've been laying the foundation for this for at least a year, where companies like Hulu, Netflix have been preparing, if not already shooting, to
Mm,
release things on a vertical platform.
yeah.
So it's not going away. We're going to see big, massive jumps. And I think it's going to happen overnight. When all the big studios kind of launch their versions, we're going to see movies that are always made, shot in a square format, with the thought of a vertical frame and a horizontal frame. And this takes a little bit longer because sometimes they'll do two takes of the same scene with adjusting the art. But
Mm.
we'll find that Terminal List 3 on Netflix is going to have a widescreen version and it's going to have a horizontal version.
That sounds like things that I've heard. But yeah, they're trying to go right. Why not just have it so that we can release across both? Because then you increase your audience, don't you?
It's
Um,
it's not too much more expensive to think about both frames and to cut it for both. And especially from an advertising and marketing standpoint, which is I think the first thing that Hulu and Netflix are really looking at is to make sure they have really good vertical trailers of all their
mm,
horizontal projects.
yeah, that makes sense. Although obviously I think we've established that West Wing probably wouldn't work because there's too much walk and talk in that.
Yeah. I mean, walking and talking is doable. It just requires more crew. We have what's called a focus puller. And this
Mm,
is somebody who's basically sitting with a monitor, just focusing the camera. And that's all they're doing. And it's such a detailed, finite job, a precision job. Very hard to do in a vertical frame because obviously, in a horizontal frame, there's so much more travel. In a vertical frame, you have to move with them entirely.
and then just finally, what projects have you got? Are there any that you've finished recently that you know are coming out soon that you're really exciting about and that people should go and have a look at?
Hmm. I tend to almost forget them as soon as they're done until they come out. But I'll tell you, the one that I did last night might have broken the vertical slap record. One
I've
scene, I had 16 slaps and four attempted slaps.
Jeepers.
One scene. My
Yeah,
hands are probably a little bruised
because
because
you're the one
basically what I do,
making them.
well, I sit
Yeah,
there and I'll time it
yeah.
every time. Sometimes for the audio, but it's mostly for the actor's reaction. If they hear that little crack, it just helps them. It just helps sell it a little bit more.
And actually, just wanted to ask, you just made me think, who are some of the best at the reactions? If you can name names, here you're like vague. If you
Oh,
almost, I guess, to
okay.
say to a young actor, of like, if you want to go and watch someone who does a great reaction, go and watch this person.
Here's an unsung hero, and I think anybody who's watched her work, she plays the villain quite a lot. Anyone who's watched her work is like, this is one of the most amazing vertical actresses. And I've always fighted for her to get a lead role because she'd be a great lead. But the thing is, she's so cut as a villain that it's so hard to think of her as anything else. Is Skyla Lynn, if you've ever seen her on any
Oh yeah,
project.
she's very good. Yeah.
She is phenomenal at stunts. And she's even stepped in and coordinated a bunch of her own stunts because occasionally they'll insert a slap and there's nobody there. And she's the type of person that can coordinate that, make it safe, and make it sell. Yeah, doing stunts with her is a breeze.
There's a brilliant, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a brilliant vertical where, as the villain, she's being escorted out of the hall and they've got her in the air and she does this amazing kick of like, let me go, let me back. And then, of course, it was improvised and
Hmm.
it came up with on the set. So,
Oh, 90% of everything is improvised by the actors. There's very little direction sometimes, and
mm,
only specific beats that either the client or the director wants. So that gives us so much room as an actor to just play and do things. And like as long as you don't have any risk of hurting anybody, we do all kinds of really wild things. I don't know if you've seen any of the day player or the bit roles I have, but at least half of them come with an accent. Like anytime they'll book a role, I won't even tell the director, and I'll just put on an accent for the first scene. And the director will come and be like, "Can you not do the accent?" And I go, "But what do you mean? This is my natural accent."
Yeah. I did get very excited in the one where you're in a wheelchair in the background. I was like, I'm
Oh,
sure
that
that's
was
you.
so fun. So that came up out of necessity because basically they wanted to do a car crash, but it was not in a closed set. It was not in a circuit. They wanted to do it on the street. And I'm like, well, you don't have the permits, and this isn't safe, and we can't do this. But we do have the parking lot that we owned inside the studio. And we're like, well, how do we make it look like a hospital? And I'm like, easy. Nurse is right there. You put me in a wheelchair smoking a cigarette outside the door. Now it's a hospital.
I love it.
And that was with Noah Fernley, if I am not mistaken. And Noah Fernley is somebody to watch in the near future. I don't know if you follow his Instagram or some of his stories, but he has booked
Coming
a
soon to a
huge
big
role on a
screen with
Ryan
Ryan
Murphy project.
Murphy near you. Yeah.
And we're very, very proud and very excited to see him on that. Noah was very recognizable to me when I worked with him because he had been working 70 days back to back on verticals,
Mm.
which he was in such high demand that they could adjust the schedules so that he could actually work 70 days on projects. And the guy looked perfect. I was so jealous. I'm like, if I worked 70 days back to back, I would be so haggard. And he still looked like porcelain. And he never broke. He never got upset. And in that scene, that poor guy was lying in a cold puddle. And that wasn't a stunt puddle. That was just natural, still water. And he was there for like an hour and it was cold. And he never complained.
Yeah. I
Noah
think
Friendly
everyone's
is
just,
a gem.
I think everyone's really excited because everyone who watches Verticals has always gone like, so many of them are amazing and that we, much as we love Verticals, we know that, career and ambition wise, they will want to do more and be able to showcase what they can do to more. So it's just really exciting to see some of them starting to go through now and booking these bigger projects. And it's
Mhm.
just hopefully it will just flow both ways. It will. I am aware of some big names who are looking at coming into verticals. So I did think it's really exciting.
Yeah. I think it's what the new soap operas will most definitely be. It'll be interesting when the big soaps, the ones that have been run for 20 or 30 or 40 years,
Yeah.
begin to think about the vertical frame. I was on set yesterday with makeup artists who work on General Hospital, and we were
Mhm.
talking on this quite a bit. General Hospital is an interesting one to me because that's the one I grew up with, where I would come home each day, and that's what my mom insisted on watching. So about 5 or 6 years of General Hospital is very steeped in my brain, and I know all the characters and everything that happened to them.
So yeah, you get quite attached to that period, don't you?
Mm.
I just want to finish the final question, just moving away from verticals, but as someone who's obviously passionate about film and just how things look, um, which film and TV shows do you personally rate for like the action, the stunts, what they've managed to achieve? What are the ones that you were like, these are my personal favourites? It works with the story, looks phenomenal.
So for stunts, one of my all-time favorite stunt scenes is actually the stunt scene in Charlie's Angels. The first one with Crispin Glover and the three leads is one
Yeah.
of my most favorite stunt scenes because it's all the elements. All four of the actors are so spot on. The stunts and the rigging are phenomenal, and the music ties it all together. For TV shows, I would always go with the original Daredevil, the one that was on Netflix,
Mm.
is a phenomenal, phenomenal stunt achievement. A lot of it is all practical. These are hallway sequences that are long one-take cuts, is easily one of my favorite.
All right, thank you so
For
much.
intimacy, I
Mm.
think one of the most interesting films is a film called The Road to Wellness with Bridget Fonda. And
Mm.
there's some interesting scenes in there where we're telling massive stories of intimacy with just somebody's hand tied to a sheet and nothing
Wow.
else but their hand on the bed. And it tells an arc of a story that I really hope we can get in verticals at some point. And I try to mimic these things
Mm.
and to reference some of my favorite films with, we have the trope of grabbing the bed sheet so often where we see the hand kind of grip and
Yeah.
grab. In this movie with Bridget Fonda, The Road to Wellness, it's the same thing, but it's really a long beginning, middle, and an end of a story. And it's
Mm.
so interesting how it's just told with a hand gripping a sheet.
I love that. So that, yeah, the ones that are appealing to you are like you can just see what they've managed to achieve with quite almost limits and just the potential that's there with the storytelling with these things.
I like implied action.
Mm,
These days, we feel like we need to show everything to the audience.
mm,
And I think things are so much more tantalizing when we imagine them. We think of like the movie Psycho. We
mm,
see the curtain flow back. We see the knife draw back. We see the blood circle the drain. We don't
mm.
need to see anything else. It's much more scary to imagine it. And this to me is more art when we can look at something and we get a different experience. We can interpret it differently. Like the movie The Substance, if you saw that one at all. We can all watch that movie and talk about it and kind of derive different notes and different messages. That's art to me. When we all watch the same thing and get the exact same experience, that's a park ride.
And it's also trusting the audience, isn't it? That the audience has the brain to fill in and take what they want to from it. So,
Sure, but also the audience is a collaboration. They're part of the
mm,
process. So sometimes the audience might derive something that was not intended. And that's
mm.
still good. That's still right, because part of it is
And that's
putting the
art, isn't
art out
it? That like it's like I didn't even have expected that someone's taken that from that, and that's amazing. So yeah.
there. That's the truest art, is when somebody sees something that the artist didn't see at all. And they're like, wow, you're right.
I just want to say thank you so much for your time because you have just come straight off a shoot and you've had very little sleep and you've been so eloquent and explained things so well. So just a huge thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your time and thank you for all you do. I mean, everybody notices, your channel and they talk about it a lot. All the vertical stars are very happy for the work that all of you guys do, and especially you and your